Hi, my name's Doug Cleaver. I'm Director of the Doctoral School at Sheffield Hallam University, and I'm on the Executive Committee of the UK Council for Graduate Education, or UKCGE, and I also co-chair their Deans and Directors of Graduate Schools Network. I'm joined today by Professor Christine Le Maitre. Christine has research degrees in our Faculty of Health, Wellbeing and Life Sciences, but we're going to talk today about Christine's supervision. Christine is an outstanding supervisor. She's won our institutional Outstanding Research Supervisor award twice, and a few weeks ago we found out that she's been shortlisted for this year's Times Higher Education Outstanding Research Supervisor Awards. So welcome, Christine. Hi.
Hi.
Can you give us a quick potted CV for everybody first?
Yes, certainly. So I did my degree at Manchester University, and then while I was doing my degree I did a sort of sandwich placement, which I actually did in one of the research labs in Manchester. Really enjoyed research, so that's what kind of got me into doing research, and they had a PhD position going, so I did my PhD in exactly the same lab, so I didn't really move very far. Then did 5 years of postdocing, still in the same lab, so if people say you have to move, you don't necessarily. And then I moved not very far away over the Pennines to Sheffield in 2008 to take up a senior lectureship position. Got promoted up to reader in 2014 and prof in 2017. But right from sort of taking on the lectureship position, I started picking up PhD students. So I was successful in getting a internally funded one and two international funded students back in 2008, which was really good experience of getting multiple students at once. When I got promoted to reader, I then took on the postgraduate research tutor role in the Biomolecular Sciences Research Centre, and then just after, in fact the day after I got prof, I went for my interview for the head of research degrees, which I was successful in. So that's how I've sort of got to the position I'm in now.
And how many completions have you had to date?
15 now.
15. Wow, brilliant. So you're an outstanding supervisor. What would you say are the main influences on your supervision?
I think probably the variety of different students that I've had experience of is a big one. So when I first started up with PhD supervision, I had a home student, but then very rapidly, like 2 months later, I then also had 2 international students. And the difference in the way those students needed supervision, the difference in the way that they came up with ideas and the sort of collaborative working and their backgrounds was really interesting. It actually showed that you can't just treat each student sort of the same, that you have to actually tailor supervision to them. And then also I'd say sort of a big influencer is listening to other supervisors talk about their interactions with students, and also students talking about their interactions with supervisors. So kind of in the forums that we have for training, a lot of those are kind of talking shops really for students to share experiences, supervisors to share experiences, and that really does open your eyes at what effect different activities can have on students and makes you think about how to supervise better.
Okay, so that's very much a kind of practitioner-focused answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
That's great. A challenge, particularly in the early stages of a supervision, can be a setting or establishing what the reasonable expectations are for students. How do you go about calibrating students' expectations, make sure they're in the right place?
I think the key thing is having a conversation early on with the student about what they want to get out of the PhD, because a PhD or a DProf of a doctorate are not just about the project. It's actually about what experiences and things they want to do. What do they want to do afterwards if they know yet? Do they want to get sort of international experience? Do they want to go to conferences? Do they want to do scientific writing? To actually learn what do they want to get out of it, so then you can make those opportunities.
And those kinds of things can often change in the middle of a doctorate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some students, I had one who was dead set that she wanted to become a teacher. Mm-hmm. But then as she got more into the research, but she wanted to do the research first as well. As she got more into the research, she got really interested in the research aspects, but then going to conferences and talking about the science, and particularly talking to clinicians, she found that actually that excited her even more. And actually then she got headhunted for, that particular type of role. So, medical scientific liaison role where you actually talk to clinicians all the time. So it's kind of it's working alongside with the students to develop their skills as they go, and every student is different really, so it isn't just a one size fits all. I think that's a key thing.
So your research is in the sciences, by molecular sciences. How do you use feedback in that context with your students?
So there's all kinds of feedback really, I'd probably say. I mean, I think the key thing really, and I think the key role of a supervisor is to develop the student to become an independent researcher. So you don't want to just tell them exactly what to do, but actually it tends to develop as the PhD goes on. And again, it depends on the student as well as to how fast you can move through the stages. But normally at the start of a PhD, they need a lot of feedback to help them design the practical work, look at the results and what kind of, interpret those results. And then on the writing, a lot of the feedback I give, I always make sure I give it orally the first sort of time. So, because there can often be misconceptions if you just write it down on an email or send it, with track changes and things like that. Of course, as you go on, you can do much more work along those sides. But also I get the students to reflect on their own development and practices. So, for example, let's say they're given a presentation, so they do a practice presentation, but before I actually start giving my feedback of how I think they can improve, I say, so how do you think that went? So they can actually sort of reflect on it and come up with what they want to change or what things they thought went really well, before I then sort of step in and start saying things.
So it really is pushing towards autonomy.
Yeah, because the best thing is, you need to make sure when they get out of their doctorate, they're ready to be independent and act as a supervisor for other students if they want to stay in academia or, lead research groups in industry or whatever role they want to do.
Quite often when you're giving feedback, you're not necessarily making the student aware that it's feedback. It's not got flashing lights. I'm feeding back to you at this point.
Yeah, it's much more, it's a discussion really of how they can develop and how they can improve rather than, you must do this sort of thing. And I always say as well that when I do give sort of the written feedback at the later stages, if there's anything they don't understand or don't agree with, discuss it, because it's their thesis, it's their work. They need to take the ownership. So if they don't agree with what I'm saying, they should argue back, and that's absolutely fine. That's sometimes a bit harder with certain cultures, but we get there.
Okay. Yeah, my students have to learn how to read my handwriting in school. An additional, very high level skill.
That I use track changes, but then discuss it with them.
Right. I scribble.
And you don't get with spelling mistakes then.
There are lots of different styles of supervision. What approach do you prefer?
I'd probably say a collaborative one. So I think it's very important for the doctorate to be a collaborative piece of work. So the development of the project is done in collaboration. The majority of the projects that I supervise are ones where I've attained external funding or internal funding for specific projects. But that doesn't mean that it's not that student's project. So often you start off with, this is the idea of the project, you see the bigger picture. But then as you go through, as they get results, they read papers or come up with their own ideas, it often goes off in tangents and things. So I think it's very much collaborative, but also supportive. So I'm not just there to support the project development or their skills development. It's also very much sort of pastoral support as well, and encourage sort of an open relationship so they feel they can talk to me about whatever they need to make sure they can succeed and look after themselves, really.
Yeah. How do you try and get your students to open up sometimes? There are difficult things to say sometimes.
I suppose one of the things is, so always sort of be empathetic with them, discuss other, experiences that I've had that I can relate to and things. So, if they're struggling in a particular aspect, I've got a young family, so, I've had a number of students who have kids or have maternity breaks in the middle, and actually I'm very open to them about my family, and often actually when I was on maternity leave, my daughter came in with me quite a bit, just so they could see that you can still do things and be a good mum and things as well. And the other thing, I guess, is sort of being open about difficulties and struggles that I've had, so they can see that they can open up to me. So, I'm dyslexic. I'm absolutely open about that. And that often leads to students being open to me and getting the support that they need and things as well.
Yeah. Life and research careers, and they're not a monotonic gradients either.
Yeah, they
They're
need
obviously
to
a
develop
long way
together.
of anybody's career. Yeah. And, being Professor Le Maitre now wasn't always obviously on the cards.
No, I mean, it's strange actually, because when I was doing my postdoc, she was also my PhD supervisor, but my boss at that point, she got made a prof when she was 40. And that kind of gave me the drive that I wanted to. It showed it could be done.
Yeah.
So it gave me the drive that I wanted to be a prof by 40, and I made it by 38, so I did it.
I think I remember seeing her there at your professorial lecture. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you got the UKCGE, let's get this right, Research Supervisor Recognition.
Yep.
Award. You got that because you took part in the pilot operation of that award. Can you just let people know how you found it, what you did with it?
Yep. So during the actual pilot, it was actually a bit of a bigger beast than it is now. So there was sort of 10 practices, I can't remember the actual wording now, but 10 sort of areas that you needed to reflect on. I found it a really useful sort of exercise, actually thinking back on my experiences, what had made me do what I do as a supervisor and how I work. Actually sort of reflecting on, what are the practices, what are the students that have made those influences and things, but then also linking into the literature. It was really good with the UKCG because they actually give you kind of a guided reading list, which is useful when you're extremely busy. That wouldn't ever dream of doing that in the research areas, but it was very useful for that. That it sort of said, oh, these papers are quite good, and it was quite reassuring actually when reading the literature on the topic. It actually kind of read as quite common sense. It did seem sensible, and I was already doing the practices, and also made me think maybe I should have written some of those papers, but I don't have the time.
You're busy writing other ones.
Yeah.
There's still time. I know that you put a lot of store by mental health and wellbeing for research students, for example.
Yep.
And leading that activity for us, which is great.
Push for that.
Yeah. So of the 10 elements of the program, I think the team-based one was one that you thought was.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm very for sort of team-based process for supervision. I think it's really important that a student doesn't just have a lone supervisor, because that can cause all kinds of issues, but also they're not developing as much. What you want to get with a student, they want to actually be able to develop the skills on a number of different avenues. I do a lot of interdisciplinary research, which by the nature of the research means you have to have supervisors who can bring different aspects to the PhD. So I think it's really important to have a number of supervisors on teams, but also that they meet the students regularly, that they don't, work in isolation, that it is actually a real team-based effort. Otherwise, I mean, I've seen a number of the issues that I've had to resolve, as sort of head of research degrees and things, is where supervisors meet students independently and then they only see each supervisor separately, and it just causes issues. So it's a collaborative approach that should be the student and all supervisors together.
Yeah. So there genuinely does need to be a discourse between across the entire team. There are some things where there isn't an obvious answer.
Yeah. And it should. And normally, with any research, there's never sort of generally a right or a wrong answer to any direction. It's normally a discussion. So I think it's really good to get the student, engaged in those discussions early on. I think one of the things you do have to be careful when you've got lots of experienced academics in the room is that the supervisors don't take over the conversation and leave the student out. And that is something that I am quite conscious of sometimes, that, we all get excited and you start talking about the research that actually have to sort of go, hold back, what do you think, sort of thing. So
yeah, in the end it's the student's thesis.
Yes. Yeah. But it's good to get excited about it as well.
Well, that's good. Last question. What do you like most about research supervision?
I think the most rewarding part of research supervision is seeing the difference it makes to a student. So seeing how they come in, at the beginning of a PhD, and how much they really do develop over that course of 3, 4, 7 years, depending on whether they're doing it full-time or part-time. That, often students come in sometimes straight from a degree, sometimes from a career elsewhere, sometimes with, they're coming from all different backgrounds, but the amount they actually develop as a person as well as all the skills, I think that is probably the most rewarding thing and the thing I really enjoy about supervision.
Yeah, you had some fantastic testimonies from your former students.
Yeah, they made me cry.
Must be what you like about it, not what makes you cry.
No, it's tears of happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, Christine. I think we'll draw a line there.